Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you are in luck. Hi, I'm Will Forat.
And I'm Justin Nagel, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Welcome back to another episode of Building Scale, specifically the Building Connection series, where I get to talk to awesome leaders and just, I think this episode highlights just badasses that are out there doing really cool stuff. Today, I get to talk to Amanda Schneider. She founded ThinkLab, the only research entity wholly focused on the built world, the built environment. She's a really respected leader and has been in a ton of publications that are very prestigious, including Forbes, MIT Sloan Management Review, Interior Design Magazine, Metropolis. She's kind of done it all. TED talker is the easiest way to put that. One that got lots of people anxious, let's put it that way, and you'll learn more about this as you listen to the episode, which was really cool. And we got to have a great conversation and really talk about just where the future is taking us with the workplace, what employees are looking for, where we can just be better at understanding that people are different, people want different things, and like we can allow that to happen. Obviously, a big person about structure myself. But everybody's structure can be different, right? So this is a really, really fun episode. And we agreed that at the end of the episode that if we saw each other in person, we would hug. So that means that we've connected digitally. I grade my connections when it's just a digital interaction. It's like, hey, if I actually meet that person, is it just like a hi or a handshake or whatever? So always looking to be better digitally, but something about being in person changes it. Also, host of the popular podcast Designs Nerd Anonymous. So if you're not listening to that and you're a design nerd or you're not a design nerd, I recommend giving that a listen. And you can find her TED Talk generally anywhere on the internet. We'll put that all in the show notes and all that fun stuff. But had a really, really good time and a blast talking to her. So I hope you do as well.
All right, Amanda, you were in industrial design. That's what you did at one point. And then you said, you know what, I actually love research. How did that transition occur? They seem a little bit far apart from each other. How did that work?
They do. I often say I'm a designer by degree, a journalist by accident, and a researcher by choice. So I'll kind of walk you through that transition. It's a great tagline, right? It kind of tells you who I am. So designer by degree, I went into industrial design, product design. My degree is from University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. And I've always had kind of a creative mind, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I met a woman who was a product designer. Her name is Anne-Marie Conrado. I'm pretty sure she has no idea what an effect she had on my business or on my life, really. And
well, shout out to her now then. Now
exactly.
She knows.
Well, now I just had to find her, but there's LinkedIn, so we can find her now, theoretically. But she talked about why she loved design and industrial design specifically, because every day is a new adventure. One day she's designing a baby's bath seat, so she's observing a mother bathing her child. Another day she's designing a scuba mask, so she has to take scuba lessons to figure out what might and might not work. And I just fell in love with that profession. I was like, that is what I want to do. Now, fast forward, I got into school and I was like, I cannot sit behind a sketchbook. I am designed to talk to people. And I realized what got me interested in industrial design was not like sketching and being behind a sketchbook and the creative side of it, as much as it was the research side of it and really connecting it with business. Kind of launched into my career really at a tumultuous time in the furniture industry. I started in the furniture industry when, if you remember, back in 2001 was the dot bomb. as these .com crash happened, the .bomb, you can all imagine, was not great for the furniture category. So my boss at the time, there's a whole funny story about a broken foot and my first day on the job that we can get into if you want to, but there was a lot of transition happening at the company where during a rebrand, marketers were getting promoted and a lot of the design staff was being let go for a very understandable reason. And so about a year into that, my boss sat me down and said, Amanda, do you want to stay in design or shift into marketing? You seem to have an aptitude for marketing. And I'm thinking designers get fired and marketers get promoted. Like, I'll do that. So they paid for me to go back to school and get my MBA. And I helped them start up the first ever market research team. And that has evolved into journalism again by accident. And I ended up starting a research company in 2011. To serve specifically the interiors industry. And that absolutely blew up on its own. I sold it to Sandow, the parent company of interior design, Metropolis, Design Milk, a lot of different design media companies. And for the last 6 years, I have been running that company on behalf of Sandow. It is called ThinkLab. And so that is kind of my quick story. Designer by degree, journalist by accident, researcher by choice.
That's quite the tale. Smart on you. Design, marketing. Well, it seems like there's one obvious option here. And then getting to go back to school and getting that paid for is always a fun, well, people that enjoy that is fun. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's so important. I feel like there's not enough connection between design and business. And I think, my whole team would tell you they're often like the most creative business people in the room or the flip of that, where they're the most business-minded creatives in the room, depending on what room they're in. So I think a lot of our success has really been as translators between business needs and how design can help that. Being that your podcast is focused on the AEC industry, I hope we spark some of that here today in this dialogue.
Yeah, no, for sure. I frequently say that 90% of problems in life, but in business certainly, are solved by communication, right? Just how do you communicate? How do you set great expectations? How do you do those things, right? It just solves so many problems. So when somebody understands the business side as well as the creative side, that is inherently that. Can I explain to you why this makes sense as a creative, but also as a business side of it? Because then that's the best of both worlds, which is great communication is essentially what that creates.
I would agree.
Yeah. So started the research company and then grew that a little bit and sold to got acquired. But what was that transition like? Obviously, going from design to then going back to school, then hey, I'm doing this research thing, and now somebody wants to buy that from me, which has got to be a great feeling. But what did that look like? What did that transition look like?
Yeah, acquisitions are tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Anytime you've been out on your own, making all of your decisions, and then you go to having a boss again and having to integrate with other companies, which is a little bit different than being on your own. So transition was tough, but obviously I'm still here 6 years later. So it's been really fun to learn how to go from being a company on our own to really integrating and not only giving the best to our sister brands, but also getting the best from our sister brands and really figuring out, sometimes through trial and error over the past 6 years, how to make that happen better, more efficiently, and in ways that is not 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 1 + 1 with all these Sandow brands equals 20.
Okay. One big thing that when we talked initially, you mentioned a lot of strategy around working moms and going down that path and hiring working moms. What drove you to that thought process in regards to strategy and hiring, and what was essentially the outcome of that?
Well, I mean, the outcome already speaks for itself. Our company was acquired. Yeah. So clearly the strategy was successful.
Success.
So yeah, exactly. So I would say the strategy was successful. But let me talk about kind of when I started this company. I started this company when my second son was born. And it was, I just did a TEDx talk about it that was one of the 1 in 18,000 actually pulled to the TED.com stage. So hopefully your listeners will go listen to that talk because I think it really tells the story of why I started this company and kind of what that transition was like. But the short version of it is I was really overwhelmed with trying to work on the rules that were created for, I think, a different time than the ones that we're living in. Typically, we work 8 to 5. Typically, the people when that schedule was designed had someone, a stay-at-home spouse that was taking care of a lot of things at home. And I had none of those things. So it felt to me like I was away from my, at that time, 2 sons. I now have 3, every waking moment. And I just thought this is not working for me. So there was kind of a calamity of issues that happened that said, okay, I'm going to go out on my own. And quite frankly, when I started this company, I thought I was flushing my career down the toilet. I thought this was it. It's just a sidestep in my career. And, what a beautiful accident that this really started to blow up, right? That what I thought was a sidestep in my career ended up being just a magical turning moment that really blew up into something much, much bigger than I could have ever imagined. But if you go back to my mindset at that time, I was trying to, find risk-free ways to grow the business because I started in 2011. By 2015, 100% by word of mouth. It was more work than I could handle. And I was kind of getting back to like, geez, I'm spending all my time away from my kids because I can't handle all the work that's coming in. So kind of a low risk way to run that business was I reached out to a lot of other working moms that had been through kind of similar personal, I'll call them personal crises that I was, that many of them had left the traditional working world for one reason or another. So my pitch to them was, I promise you nothing. Basically, sometimes we'll have more work and therefore you'll have more money. Other times you'll have more time. And that was something that they valued, most of them equally as much as they valued money. Sometimes you'll have more time with your kids. So it was a true consultancy where, we did very clear scope of work, statement of work. We paid them well when we had work, but consulting, as you know, can be a little bit cyclical, a little bit up and down. So we really structured the business in a way that was very friendly to what these core demographic of people valued. And I also have to say, power to the working moms, shout out to the working moms, because there's no one more efficient with their day than a working mom. Most working moms love work and they love life. They're not going to waste time. If they're at work, they want to be impacting the work that they do. They're not going to get very caught up in any wasted time at work. And if they're at home, they want to be home. So I really appreciated, that passion that a lot of these women had for both work and life and trying to figure out how to effectively balance the two.
This is so randomness. I have a 5-year-old. So I watched Sing, the animated movie, for the first time.
Great movie.
I don't know, less than a week ago, literally within the last 7 days. So the mom character in that movie has like 25 little piglets, essentially is what it is. But she then builds this whole like contraption to make sure that she can take care of the kids while she goes off to do her singing career, the thing that she really wanted to do. And that just kind of goes to your point. I know obviously a silly kind of thing, but like, it's so true. Like a mom just figures shit out. Like, hey, like I have only X amount of time. How do I make this work in the time I have to be able to do all the unbelievable amount of things I have to do? And my wife, Jamie, very similar to that. The amount of stuff she can achieve is baffling to me. I think I am fairly productive as a human being, but Jamie is just next level human being. It's amazing.
Kudos to Jamie. Shout out to Jamie.
That's cool that the time or money, and if you value both of those, that kind of relationship makes tons of sense for consultancy, which is super. Even how you said that, I was like, oh shit, that sounds way better than what I would think of like, well, sometimes we'll be busy and sometimes we won't. You're like, either you're going to have more money or you're going to have more time. Either way you win. That's awesome. So good on you.
And I'm hopeful for a variety of reasons for the future as it relates to this topic. I'm hopeful that in the future, as a society, we evolve so that the piglet mom is not having to create a machine that does this, that there is more structure and support societally that helps it. And I'm also hopeful that in the future, we have more employment options. One of the things that I'm talking about as I look at, even as I give advice to the many, many brands that we work with now is, what do you need a full-time employee for? What can AI do? Right? Which is a whole nother element of this conversation because are things that AI can do. And then what could be handled by a consultant? Because I hope whether it's aging baby boomers that still want to keep one foot in the workforce, whether it's, these entrepreneurial young generation, Gen Z, even Gen Alpha is not so far behind. The oldest of them is around 13, 14 right now. I think in the future, we're going to have not one work path. You're either working or you're not working. I hope that we have multiple options. And I think that will be a win for employers and employees that are looking for something different out of life, whether it's to take care of kids, aging parents. Maybe you've got a hobby and you want to travel to a dude ranch every summer. I think that there's hopefully a lot more options in our future. And as a culture, we're evolving.
Yeah, I'm on the same wavelength as you, or thought process of you, certainly, and seeing like we should be evolving into the next, especially with AI and how fast that moves. Like that specifically should be able to help us pull work away to then actually have more time to do other things of either passion or purpose in our lives. So that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I
yeah,
love the consulting world because in the consulting world, you can't hide. Like you hear about trimming the fat in corporations, right? Because in corporations, you can have probably a cush job where you can hide out. In the consulting world, if you are not good, your business will not survive. And maybe that terrifies some of your listeners, but I would say, in speaking to the business side of this, any consultant that's making it on their own is really worth hiring because you can't make it on your own if you're not hustling, if you're not great at what you do, if you don't get those client referrals. So I kind of see this consulting world as a beautiful benefit to businesses too, because it weeds out the non-performers.
Interesting. Before we dive into that, let's see what that framework looks like. You mentioned obviously the TEDx talk or going into the 18,000 that got moved up
One
to
in 18,000. Yeah, it's
which is insane.
0.0058%. Yes.
So one, kudos to you. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. No big deal. Let's talk about it though. Like what is the discussion about?
So the title of it is Work is Broken. Gen Z can help us fix it, which if you just heard me say that might be really triggering for you. If you work with a Gen Zer, maybe it hasn't been the greatest for you. I was just on a text thread with a bunch of girlfriends last night that were complaining. There are a bunch of Gen Xers that are complaining about the Gen Zers in their work life. So please listen to the talk. Don't just look at the title. If you read the comments on the TEDx talk or on the TED.com link, you'll see that a lot of people have only read the title and reacted to that and not listened to the whole talk. But basically,
that's its own problem in society. Headline readers that don't actually dive into any more information than a headline.
Yes.
But I don't want to get off track here. Go ahead.
We could have a whole podcast episode just on that. Let me tell you, as a research brand and a media company, that is rampant for sure. But the premise of the talk is really setting up. We've done a ton of research at ThinkLab around Gen Z. We've done this because we focus on the built environment and kind of how data and insights help not only interior designers and architects, but also product brands be ready when we get to the future. So Gen Z is coming to the workplace, and this started out by really understanding, not only how will Gen Z affect the future of work, but specifically how will Gen Z affect our industry. So I will send a link to that research because I think it's fascinating for any AEC firms that are trying to understand kind of what is the specific implication to this industry. But what we saw there was so interesting because I felt like a lot of what Gen Z was asking for, as frustrating as it may be to my generation, and I will acknowledge that fully, was not so unlike what I was asking for as a working mom trying to build this business. And I am very out and very public and very loud talking about that working mom structure today. But I will say I've been building this business for 14 years, and I'm only telling that story now because of the proven business success first that I can now kind of back up and tell that working mom story. So I think what's interesting as we parallel those two journeys is really exploring where the commonalities are between what I wanted as a working mom and what Gen Z is asking for. And I don't think they're that different. And so that's what the talk gets into, is really looking at kind of what Gen Z is asking for, how it is very different from, maybe some of these standard norms that our work culture today is built upon, and how we can kind of work with them rather than being frustrated by them to help get to a better future.
Is this, because change is scary for lots of people, businesses certainly, but just people in general, change can be scary. Generational changes, how one generation, and again, this is somewhat generalization, but like how one generation interacts compared to the next is different. Where are some of those misconceptions of like, hey, we've done things this way and this is how it works, and like you are just young in your career and you don't understand, compared to like, oh no, actually there is some components here that maybe totally fill the gaps of like where things did suck or where things didn't work in how we've been operating. And obviously the working mom framework, as well as this Gen Z framework, and the parallels to that, there's got to be places that you're like, oh yeah, these are just straight misconceptions and people are just stuck in thinking the way that it's just the way it's always been kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm. So I want to start with, there's a lot of misconceptions out there about generational research. So I'm guessing, Justin, are you a millennial?
I am a millennial. I'm a proud millennial. I don't know if
I feel like your shirt said that to me today.
Yeah. That's it, as it should. But it also says retired Florida man. So like, I
A
don't
little
know
bit.
if that's
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
true.
Yeah. It could say both. It could say both. This has a lot of things and I'm loving it. But I think because of what generational research did to the millennials, what we did to the millennials is we stereotyped them. And I often tell the story when I take the stage about a conference that I was at where there was a researcher talking about research around millennials on the stage. And I was sitting next to a friend who's a baby boomer. And every time the speaker would say, well, millennials want work-life balance, he would lean over and whisper in my ear. And then he would say, millennials want more money. And he would lean over and say, and I think that that's the problem. When generational research sets up that this is what this generation wants, they set up a win-lose dynamic. So for millennials to get what they want, baby boomers have to give something up. So the way that we started this research was very, very different. What we did is we looked at the business problems first. What are the problems that your business is struggling to solve? Again, when we started this research back in 2023, it was specifically with architecture and design firms. Where are you, this is the question we asked, where are you struggling to connect your teams today across generations, geographies, and digital divides? And I'm writing a book now on all this research. So it will be out in June of 2026 with Wiley. So more on that to come. But I literally have a Post-it that stays on my computer that says generation, geography, and digital divide, because we have to start with the business problem. And then we look to Gen Z, not as stereotypes, but as prototypes to help us figure out how to solve them. So when you prototype something, you keep the aspects that work and you kind of get rid of the ones that don't. So this is not to say Gen Z has all the answers, but what is unique about Gen Z, especially if you look at this period from about 2020 to 2025, and the acceleration that happened culturally in terms of where we were going. Gen Z entered the workforce, assuming a traditional 4-year degree, right before the pandemic hit. The earliest of them entered the workforce in May 2019. So most of Gen Z has never known, as one of them called in an interview, the world before the pandemic. And so to them, what is maybe novel or different to all of us that very much knew the world before, I've already said I've been in the workforce since 2001, to them is just as natural as the air they breathe. A fish doesn't know it's in water, it's just swimming. So by looking to them to kind of see what's as natural to them as the air they breathe, it maybe can give us, collective views about our future. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, okay.
Yeah. So let me back up to some of the business challenges that I see today. And I want to kind of set the stage for really why this is fascinating and important to me. So there is a trust gap forming. We wrote an article for Forbes that went viral that said, it was titled Gen Z and the Great Back to Office Debate Won't End in 2023. If you search that title, you can find it. We'll also make sure to put a link in the show notes, but you'll see a beautiful chart in there that shows a growing trust gap. We asked the question, what is the biggest problem with hybrid? And about 12% of baby boomers say trust, but about 24%, so double the amount of Gen Zers say trust. Because remember, in our research, we are not just looking at Gen Z. We looked at these perceptions across all generations to look for these trend lines and where it was trending. So what I see is this growing trust gap. And in fact, Gallup, actually, you probably are familiar with their engagement poll that said that, in 2020, we saw this sharp decline in engagement. Well, fast forward to over the last year, we've seen a similar drop in engagement recently that we saw during the pandemic. So what that tells me is you could argue the problem is hybrid work. Maybe, but I would say we're not going backwards. I don't think we can put that toothpaste back in the tube, especially as you look at the expectation of these younger generations. So it tells me that something that we're doing is not working. Work was built around rules that work happens 9 to 5. We're definitely working into the evenings. Even if you're fully back into an office today with our technological connectivity, you're working across geographies all the time. Again, that pushes into the time argument. So what I say is work is still happening against rules that were created for a time that no longer exists. Now, during the pandemic, we fast forwarded into maybe a period of time that nobody liked. So we know we don't want that, but we can't go backwards. Yet we don't yet know what better looks like. So this is what I'm exploring in the book. It's a very brief version in the TED Talk to really say, how do we begin that exploration? Where do we go next? Because we are not on a path for thriving in our industry or in our world the way that work exists today.
Okay.
Lots to unpack here.
Lots to unpack. Sorry, I just got on a soapbox there.
No, loved it. So I've historically been a huge believer in metrics or scorecard, like some form of like what you're doing, not how much time you're doing the thing, right? So it's like sales is very I feel like historically has been more similar to this, right? Because it's just like, what are you selling? How you got to that sale, I generally don't care, assuming that it's, legal and all those things. But like, if you made one phone call and it created dollars in the door for me, awesome. Now, if it takes you 100 phone calls to do that same amount of dollars in the door, then I would expect the same activity to occur, right? So sales has been more similar to this metric based or scorecard based grading system compared to other traditional, roles where it's like you clock in at 9, you do whatever for the next 8 hours, and then you clock out, and that means you've succeeded that day and then that week after you get to the end of the week. I feel like because everything is so structured based on that, like, for us, IT and cybersecurity, like we have to be available when our clients are working, right? So like, hey, I can't have my engineers just work from, 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning or something like that because like, oh, well, you can't actually interact with users because they're not in the office. Now, again, if time went on and it's like, oh, this time just disappears of like when people are working, then the problem gets solved. I just feel like has to be the first domino to make this occur, to make this reality become more tangible for more businesses that are customer service driven. That's where my brain starts going.
Yeah. So one of the chapters is working title is Think Like a Narcissist, right? And it's really about it's really about getting in touch with when and where we work best. So there's a line in my TED Talk that says, while many of us have never had this privilege, the future of work starts with understanding when and where we work best. And kind of a fun story around that is, as I was working on my talk and practicing my talk, I reached out to my best friend with an audio recording of the talk to have her listen to it. And her response was, Amanda, like, in the industry you work in, you think about this all the time. In the company you've built, obviously this has been a hot topic for you. And in fact, research, a lot of the data shows now, research by the Future Forum shows that people in general care more about when they work than where they work. Yet a lot of the dialogue really focuses on return to office, back to office, home office, like what's it going to be, right? So as I was practicing this with her, she said, you've thought about this by nature of your work, but most of us have never thought about this. So my challenge in the talk, and it's going to get even deeper in the book, is when and where we work best might be different for you and I. It might be different for you, Justin, and some of the engineers that work for you. I will tell you, I do my best heads down mental work at 4 a.m. That is not normal for most people. Most people are not excited to jump out of bed at 4 a.m. and do work, but that's when I work best. So if we can find those things about ourselves, this is the Think Like a Narcissist piece, then we can start to design work in a way that balances those preferences. And, with this always on world, it's not so bad. If one of your engineers loves to work from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., that's great. I love to work at 4 a.m. Let's have a little overlap and I'll start my shift at 4 and we can have a little overlap and then move on from there. So I think we can't design better until we know what better is, right? And so I think it really starts with all of us kind of diving deep to understand what better looks like for us and maybe even focus on identifying some of those patterns. I think we started it probably during the pandemic. We were forced to think about when and where and how we can possibly get work done. But I think that work has to continue. And I think no brilliant architect, no brilliant designer can design for better until we understand what better means.
Okay. I love that. I'm a big believer in structure. I think literally structure is everything. I think that's how you structure your life, how you structure your business, how do you, your belief system. It's all just structure. It's all structure different ways. You take any religion, it's just a structure. Like, it's just, these are the things that allow us to operate in different ways. And so to your point of like, hey, your structure starting at 4 a.m., which I'm a 5 a.m. guy, so I love it. But like, that's your structure that works compared to an engineer that's like, I'm really a night owl and like 10 p.m. at night through 6 or 7 in the morning, whatever. Like, that's actually where I would just be more productive because it's just who I am. So I love that concept. When I when you run this out, because like individual company, I can see how, okay, this can start working. But because there's so much of our markets open at certain times, like there's so much pieces that are based on this like block of time, daylight time, essentially, it's hard for me as a commoner, and I'm going to call myself a commoner here, to like foresee the future of like, we could totally change this. Like for me, I love the idea for me individually, but like, how do we get that at scale becomes, for me, is always the challenge in my brain. But you're writing a book about this, so maybe I should just wait and then read your book.
Definitely read the book. But, I think there's challenges in our workplace and there's challenges in our culture. And, culture is very slow to adapt. I think that's what's been so painful about the last 5 years, is that it was kind of a shock to all of our systems, right? And we're having to figure it out and adapt and restructure that. So I think whether we're talking about broad change or intercompany change or even inter-team change, it's really starting to look from the bottom up. Think about a pyramid. Often we start from the top and mandate down. If we look at, I think that the way that these norms are going to be built in the future, it is going to be by building that pyramid from the bottom up. So in a company, that would start with team level agreements. If you've read the book, there's a book called How the Future Works. Brian Elliott, Sheila Subramanian, and Helen Krupp wrote it. They talk about something called team level agreement that really agrees on communication hierarchies. Back to your point, Justin, about communication. What does a text mean versus a Slack versus an email? In our culture, an email means whenever you can get to this. But a Slack message is like, the minute you're free, I need this. And a phone call is like, now, Amanda, like right now, answer the phone, right? Like something's on fire. So these team level agreements start to build from the ground up what good looks like, what that communication level looks like. And then, as you start to put the team triangles together, you can start to build maybe common working hours, maybe meeting hours for your company, or between 10 and 3, even though some teams might generally work between 7 a.m. and 4, and other teams might work between 10 and 7. That absolutely happens as we're talking about scaling. My team is a very early team. The Interior Design Magazine team tends to work late into the evening. So if we have meetings, they know to kind of schedule on the earlier side of that for us, and we know to schedule on the later side of that for us. So to me, I think it's going to be really flipping mindsets from the top-down triangle. That's probably the problem with some of these return to office mandates right now, is, trying to enforce what works for one upon many, to that bottom up triangle, which I think is new for us, and new is harder because, to your point, we don't like change. But look at how we're shifting, how social media shifted news. Now we don't trust the top of that triangle. We trust more people and the 5-star rating from the bottom of the triangle. I think it's a societal shift that's happening, and I think we're just still figuring it out.
Okay. That is, I love it. I'm all about this idea. I'm sign me up. Where do I sign my petition for this structure? No, it's this also happens with when you have companies that are interacting with other global companies, right? It's just like, hey, like you're literally on the other side of the world. Like you are, like there's like a 2-hour window that our times like today overlap. Like that's just what it is, because you're literally on the other side of this giant, rock that we live on. So some of those things do occur at a certain point, like thinking about like, how can I get things scheduled in a right way? And I do think it does matter. You mentioned the return to office a ton, just based on what you've seen. What does that look like? I have our perspective based upon our team, and like we've not had any mandate to have to come back. But what we think we are doing is building a great culture that is encouraging people to want to be in the office and just be here all the time, which is a really interesting, cool thing. But like, what are you seeing when it comes to actual data?
It's all over the place. The media, I think, encourages this frenzy around this debate that sounds like it's zeros and ones. Is hybrid here to stay on one side, or are we returning to the office on the other side? And I actually hate that it's zeros and ones. There's a line in my TED Talk that says, I believe that in the future, some companies will be fully back to office, and that will be their unique competitive advantage. For those that are really doubling down on, you can't collaborate as well in a virtual world, you can't build trust as well in a virtual world as you can in person, those companies are going to thrive. They're back in the office 5 days a week, really figuring out ways to do that. That will be one choice. At the opposite end of the spectrum, you have your digital first companies. ThinkLab and Sandow, our parent company, is a digital first company, which means we create all of our structures and operating systems in the digital world first. But we very much value physical space, obviously by nature of our work. We very much value FaceTime. But when we choose to do that FaceTime, theoretically, the money we save on rent, we instead use to do a team retreat once a year where we're all physically in the same place and we're, investing money and time there. They do have offices in New York that our team visits for strategy meetings when really it's best to be face to face. And I think for other companies, that digital first approach will be the winning approach. They will win this talent war by being there. I think the majority of companies now, today, and in the future are going to be somewhere in between that have a hybrid strategy. We're seeing most companies landing on, 2 to 4 days in the office with higher attendance Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, less on Mondays and Fridays. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't think we all have to choose back to office or choose digital first or fully remote. I think that companies will exist on a spectrum. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Listen, my husband and I, we live in the same home, but I love working remotely. It works for me. I love to travel. It works for me. He loves to go to an office, working from home 5 days a week. He felt like he was dying during the pandemic. It was just not for him. So I think as individuals get clear about what they want and companies get clear about what they stand for and the way they believe their culture will thrive best, it will allow us to make better career matches. And I don't think all companies have to choose the same lane. I don't think all individuals have to choose the same lane. I think we just have to be clear about what we need, what we're offering, so we can make those better matches.
That makes perfect sense. I'm very people-y, as people tell me. I'm one that has high emoting, right? So I emote very highly in the digital world and then obviously in the physical world as well. And it's wild the amount of times when I meet a person I've met digitally once or twice, like through the podcast, that when I meet them in person for the first time, we hug, right? Like, which is just a crazy idea because it's like, you obviously have connected with somebody digitally at such a level that they feel comfortable enough embracing you, which is a wild, cool thing, but that's not everybody. Like, not everybody does that. Not everybody emotes as high as I do. Not everybody is as comfortable digitally as they are in person. Like, all of those factors play to this kind of role of like, hey, like, what's the structure if you flip it on the people first and then move your way up or down the triangle or up the pyramid, whatever way the pyramid's facing now, it does create these things where it's like, oh, Justin can be great digitally, but does love to interact at some touches in comparison to, be in the office every day. And he does really well at that compared to somebody else where it's like, if you're not interacting, you feel like you're losing something if you're not physically in the same room as somebody else, where I don't have that same loss of connection with people.
And I would say that one of the surprising things in my observation, this is not research-based, this is observational based from Amanda Schneider, is that you would think that more extroverts like us, I can tell you're an extrovert like me, would want to physically be in an office versus an introvert. My husband is an engineer. He is definitely an introvert, would not want to be, but I actually find it to be the opposite. To me, for especially fully remote companies, you have to be very intentional. And to be very intentional, it means like, if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to call somebody up. Or if I have a problem, I'm going to call somebody up. There's no hesitation, total extrovert to do that, to reach out to somebody, to make that happen, that intentionality. An introvert, it's harder for them to do that. And I think that that is one of the challenges that's happening right now. You think that extroverts want to be in office, introverts want to be at home, but actually those introverts often need that accidental, spontaneous combustion that happens in an office where us introverts, we're fine making it happen on our own.
I've never thought of it, but that makes perfect sense to me because I've seen similarities when I think of other people of like, oh no, I really need to go to the office compared to not. And it's like that I do feel like I thought initially that I was going to hate, like when COVID occurred, which is when I started working remotely. I thought for sure I was going to like lose my mind. Like I thought like, oh, there's no way, I need the interaction of people. And what has actually happened is like, yeah, I get some of that and it's fun and it's cool to like go meet some people at different times for lunches or network, whatever. But like in the reality, it's like, oh, I'm absolutely more productive, like just across the board, because I'm not distracted by the people that are there that I then inherently want to talk to all the time. Like, it's just like, I think that there's a lot to the extrovert that can work remotely, but then also do things when they need to. And I agree, I can reach out to anybody at any point in time. I literally, if I'm in the car, I'm calling people, and that people are like,
Same.
you call people? And I'm like, yeah, because like, why would I? Yeah, of course I call people. Like that to me, it's like, of course I want to talk to people and like just see how they're doing, and like, or I have a thought or an issue or a crazy idea and I just want to share it with somebody. So like that is very natural for me, but certainly not for everybody.
I would agree.
Wow, this has been a ton of fun. We're obviously going to throw all the stuff we talked about in the show notes, all that fun stuff. But if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that? Assuming you want them to get a hold of you, I guess is the.
I would love
way
for
to
them
think
to get a
about
hold of me. Yeah, so I'm a big LinkedIner. So
Okay.
Amanda Schneider on LinkedIn, you can find me. Has a little nerd emoji. You'll find it there on LinkedIn. So if this sparked something for you, I would love for you to reach out on LinkedIn. I would also invite you to follow. I have 2 podcasts. Our kind of lead podcast is one called Design Nerds Anonymous. So it's really about trying to make creative work and design interesting to business people. And I would say vice versa, making that business talk interesting to designers and trying to bridge the gaps there between business and design. So our tagline is sparking curiosity at the intersection of business and design. So that is Design Nerds Anonymous, wherever you get your podcasts. And temporarily in 2025, we have started a second podcast that we don't know if it's going to survive or not, but it is a fascinating listen given everything that's going on in 2025. This podcast is called Baseline. And Baseline is really trying to kind of give you context for decision making in 2025. We know, especially for the product side of the industry, for the built environment, 2025 has been a little bit tumultuous. We've had tariffs. No, wait, we don't. No, yes, we do. No, now they're on hold. There's a little bit of economic uncertainty, especially as we go towards the back half of the year. So what we have started is a very short form weekly podcast and survey. So each episode of the podcast, 10 minutes long, answers one key question. You'll see the question we're going to answer with data that pulls from all of that survey. And then we do it in a very quick storytelling way that is easy for the most creative design minds to understand kind of the economics. And we give you quotable quotes that you can use with your clients to help you sound smarter, have context for the decisions that you're making. And it really is just designed to help us navigate 2025 and these economic ups and downs. And you vote with your listens. So if you love it, listen, tune in, and your listens will tell us you want us to keep going. Or if not, then just stay tuned in to Design Nerds Anonymous. But we love the world of podcasting. We hope you join us on our podcast as well.
That's awesome. I'm excited to listen to both. Very fascinating on the one that is not sure that it's going to last, but I love the communication connection and then also what's just happening in the current day. So that's really cool. Anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say goodbye?
Goodness, I will say, if I could leave you with one parting thought, it's if you are creative, listen to this. Continue to try to understand this business world. The more that you can understand and communicate your design's impact on the business side of this, the more of the great creative work that you can do. And I would say for anyone who is a business leader listening to this that is related in any way to the creative industry, really consider data in your storytelling and how you can use data to give your clients context, again, to make these better business decisions. If you need any more inspiration, any more data, stats, facts specific to this industry, head over to thinklab.design, our website. We have everything from interior designs, giants of design, like the Fortune 500, but interiors firms that can tell you what's happening with the industry. We have the U.S. Design Industry Benchmark Report that looks at what's growing, what's shrinking, how the industry is shifting, both on the commercial and residential side year over year. So we have a lot of data for you, and we hope that you follow ThinkLab. And thanks so much, Justin, for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a blast. I'm excited to get this episode out. Just enjoyed you as just a human being. So in addition to how smart you are and all the success you had and everything we've talked about, you just feel like a good human being to know. So I'm thankful.
I would give you a hug, Justin. If we met in person, I would give you a hug. I'm a hugger.
All right. Well, next time I'm in Chicago, I'll make sure that I find a way to get us in a similar room so we can embrace.
All right. I love it.
That sounded weirder than I think it should have, but nonetheless,
we could cut it out in post. Yeah.
Yes. But nonetheless, this has been tons of fun, and thank you for your time today.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.